to the Athletic Football Show. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today, it's my good friend Nate Tice. Nate, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well. Now our pre-show discussion makes me want to play FIFA. I just really want to play the video game FIFA as we're talking about American football. But no, we were talking about old video games we used to play, generally all sports games, and then we realized that we're washed as we get older. I know I am in sports games. That everyone's like, why don't you play Madden online? No, are you kidding? I don't know the meta. But no, I am doing very well. I'm mostly a single player guy now. I'm old. I do Zelda. I do like a little bit of Overwatch, but that's all I do in my old age. But yeah, that's my video game experience these days.
I haven't played a video game in I don't even know however many years. I used to like reading about video games when we were at Greenland. We had Tom Bissell wrote about video games for us, and I would read those stories because I would put them into our CMS. So I was reading about video games as recently as like 10 years ago, even though I haven't consistently played video games since I was in college. And even in college, I didn't really play video games in college. It was only when I would come home and play with my high school friends. So video games in general have just been sort of a blind spot for me for most of my life. But I understand the love other people have for them.
Mine was I got away from it a little bit in college. Again, more sports games. And then after college, when I was living on my own for 5 years, it was a lot of on own time for Nate. So there's a lot of video game time to fill that space.
All right, we got a big week ahead of us here. A couple games that we're going to dig into. Obviously, it's the holiday weekend. Just a heads up for everybody. We haven't said this anywhere yet. We are not going to have our Week 16 recap available to you guys on Monday morning because Monday is Christmas. The show is going to be up on Tuesday morning. We're recording it first thing Tuesday morning, so hopefully it's up around midday Eastern time on Tuesday the 26th. So just a heads up for when you're looking for the show and when it's going to be available. That is our plan right now. The game of the weekend, one of the games of the year, a game that everyone will be able to watch in prime time on Christmas after you're done with all the time you're spending with your family. We have Niners and Ravens this week. Very simply, the game of the year. A game between two of, I think, the best 15 teams ever measured by DVOA is what Aaron Schatz said earlier this week. Two teams that have been dominant for stretches on each side of the ball. A Niners team that feels unstoppable right now. And right now, I think undeniably the two best teams in football and very possibly a Super Bowl preview between these two teams.
Yeah, this is fun. Not that Giants Patriots 2007 week 17 Super Bowl preview that we didn't know would be a Super Bowl preview. That was more like, oh, the Patriots are going for it and the Giants are frisky and need it. This is more like, no, these are two seemingly juggernauts going at it, and including two elite units on each side of the ball going against each other, which is a lot of fun. And then it's not like the tag team partner on the other side of the ball of each team is like some slappy. It's actually very good units on those sides. So it is players, coaches, scheme stuff. This got it all. I mean, this is what you want, and it's prime time, and hopefully we get decent weather. That's the only thing that we just got to hold on to.
It's everything that you could ask for. And what stands out to me about both of these teams is that they really answered the questions we had about them coming into the year. There were lingering questions, significant questions about both of these teams. Coordinator changes, coaching staff changes. We hadn't seen Brock Purdy outside of a half a season stretch after what he did last year. And each of these teams, I think, have answered the bell when it comes to all of those questions. The Niners offense has been even better than we could have hoped after a little bit of a downturn in the middle of the season and some discussion about that. Steve Wilkes has stepped in and stabilized the Niners defense. That unit is playing very well again. And on the other side, Todd Monken has really unlocked this version of the Ravens offense. We've seen Lamar grow and expand and really kind of step into this new version of himself and remind everyone what kind of player he is at his best. And after one season as their defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, who I thought we were very excited about coming into the year, he did a really good job last year. It's been the same thing for the Ravens defense. We've seen Kyle Hamilton and Roquan Smith really develop into these star players as all of the supporting cast pieces, whether it be Geno Smith, Jadeveon Clowney, Justin Madubuike, all of those guys have become the best versions of themselves. So these two teams where the ecosystems have really led to that sort of growth and success, watching that face off against each other in these sorts of moments, there's nothing better than that.
Yeah, and going against, like, when they beat up bad opponents and they're doing well against tough opponents and they're finding different answers, it's a lot of fun. Both of these teams, when we did our top 10 offense, top 10 defensive shows, they were ones we were high on with both of their units. Like it was like 4 for 4. They were getting love from some way from one of us because and they played that way, which I think again, to what you're speaking to. Okay, how's Purdy play throughout the whole year? Well, yeah. Okay, we see how that's going. How does the offensive line hold up?
Historically good offensive production.
Yeah. How does the offensive line hold up? One of the best Shanahan offensive lines he's had, definitely with the 49ers, most complete. Even if it's, of course, Trent Williams is the star, but the others are just doing a nice, solid job where they don't stand out. And that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Stand out where you're like, yes, we'll talk about one spot maybe a little later. But on also on the defense, like you said, that there were some blemishes, and there still are some things that maybe pick at with Steve Wilkes' defenses, but they have been a very good unit, again, with very good players. And when they've had injuries like to Hufanga, the backups have stood out and played well. And when they've had maybe some personnel questions, they found answers, whether it's the Chase Young trade or stuff like putting Isaiah Oliver in the slot and bumping Isaiah Oliver out of the slot and putting Lenore into the slot, which I think was just a huge move for this team after the bye week that led to a lot. So yeah, just loving what all these units are doing, even if they aren't exactly perfect.
A lot to dig into, but to me, the most intriguing matchup in this game, and probably the most intriguing matchup of the year, is this Niners offense against the Ravens defense. The only reason the Ravens defense doesn't rank number one in virtually every single category is because the Browns are doing some ridiculous shit right now.
Right.
The Ravens defense in virtually any other season would be the best defense in the league. We know the Niners offense is the best unit in the league and is one of the best offenses we've seen over the last decade or so. And what's fascinating to me in this game is that the Niners do such a great job of always dictating to the defenses that they play against. Their ability to make you play the way that they want to and really hammer you when they kind of put you in a box in those specific situations. How does that play out against a Ravens team that their superpower is that they can play anything all the time and it can unfold in any way all the time?
It's fun. It's the motion is what we all love on offense, and then the defensive version of motion is pre-snap disguise and post-snap movement. It's these guys are going against each other. It's the kaleidoscope scheme is what I'm calling it, the Ravens defense versus, of course, Shanahan and what he can do and how he can wield all these weapons. It's just awesome on both sides. This is how I've kind of framed it. It's a top 2% defense versus a top 1% offense.
Mm-hmm.
Like that I know that's so funny with the Browns. It's like, oh, the Ravens have all these stats. The Browns are higher. It's like they're like 23rd since 2000 in DVO or an EPA per play. Oh, the Browns are 11th. It's just like, dang, like right there. But it's an awesome unit. But this 49ers team, I mean, so it's one of the most explosive teams we've seen in recent memory. They're up there with the greatest show on turf, Rams, which is saying something. It's
a funny parallel considering Brock Purdy's MVP case actually looks a lot like Kurt Warner's back then.
Oh yeah, it does. Oh yeah. They don't play alike, but the case does. I see that. But
just where they came from, how surprising it is, the supporting cast, the schematic advantages, a lot of the boxes that Purdy is ticking as to why he could be the MVP. Exactly. It's very similar to that conversation about Kurt Warner 25 years ago.
Yeah, there's been Rich Gannon, but that was a little older and stuff like that. Randall Cunningham's case in 98, but that was like he was older again too, but just the guys around him. But these, it's awesome. I think first and second down is going to be the huge key to this game. 49ers want it that way. They want to win on first and second down, but also the Ravens might have an advantage on those third and longs, especially when the 49ers have to drop back because the Ravens invest a lot of time and all that disguise and doing all that stuff. So that is just what I'm going to be focusing on when I watch this matchup between two juggernauts.
Let's start with first and second down in those early downs. Yeah. We talked a lot. I ranted a lot about what Kyle Shanahan has done on the Sunday night show. And I wanted to actually dig into some of the specifics of the ways that he has made the game simpler for his offense this year. Just a couple numbers that align with that. The Niners ranked 32nd in pass attempts this season. That's partially because they're blowing teams out. It's partially because they like to run the ball. They are first in pass attempts with 8 or more guys in the box. So think about that. They're dead last in pass attempts overall. They're first in pass attempts with 8 or more defenders in the box. That's how good they've been at figuring out what kind of looks they want to attack and how they're going to throw on those looks. They are 6th in the amount of dropbacks that they have faced against base defense, even though they are dead last in pass attempts in the NFL. Purdy's EPA per dropback against base defense this year is 5 times higher than the league average. So what the Niners want on early downs is they want to get you in base and they want to throw the shit out of the ball when you do it. So how do the Ravens respond? Because guess what? if you play nickel, which is seemingly the correct answer to that, if you want the ball thrown on you less, this Niners team, as constructed, with that more physical offensive line that we're talking about, and with Christian McCaffrey, is going to run the ball down your throat until you tap out. So there really is no good answer here. And I think the answer the Ravens lean on and the answer the Ravens find, that to me is the most fascinating question about this game.
It is. It's how teams and play callers package offensive plays, no matter what the level, high school, college, pros. The most basic one, the most basic kill alert, changing from one play to another, just using all the terms. I'll think of more as it goes along, but whatever one you want to
think about a team lining up at the line of scrimmage when the quarterback puts both hands to the side of his head like that. That's what you're saying.
Especially watch a preseason game when it's all these backups try and make a prove point. They always emphasize and everyone over communicates it. That's what we see the most. You can't two plays together, but the most basic one is single high, two high. Is it single high coverage? Okay, we are usually going to pass the ball or run a run that is good, has answers against single high coverage. Outside zone, pin pull, stuff towards the tight end. Duo can be if you do it right. We are not going to run inside zone. We're not going to run counter. That stuff is away from the tight end. You do not have the numbers to do that. Typically, you can funky it up in a killed play. You can't. What's cool about Shanahan, what I really like, I think as I'm watching this, is that he will kill the play not just off single high, two high, because that makes you predictable. He will, but not just that. He will kill the play based off what coverage it is, what the front is, where a particular player is. Like I have spoken before, I've been in offenses where it's like, hey, Von Miller's over there. Okay, we can't do that. We're going to run this play over here, or we're going to pass in this particular pass play. So what I've noticed, though, and when I was kind of breaking down this game, is that the 49ers do not face a lot of man coverage. And
they're the bottom of the league. I think it's a bottom 3 rate.
Yep. One of the lowest rates, especially on first and second down. Why that is because the 49ers throw the ball over 2/3 of the time when they do know that they have man coverage. And all that motion and gyrations and shifting and everything they do, we usually think of all those motions to go, oh, it's a pass play. Okay, that is now man coverage. We are going to run that. We're going to run that man beating route, or we're going to target that man beating route. What the 49ers do, they go, no, we're going to run this man beating concept. Where the whole play is designed to beat man and maybe have an answer if we got caught in its zone. So why that is, they have Ayuk, they have Deebo Samuel, they have Kittle, they have CMC. No defense in the NFL, even the best ones, have the horses to keep up with that for 60 snaps, for 40 snaps. So what Shanahan's done is basically blitz teams offensively out of man coverage because they do all the motions to get to that. And usually when they get the zone, all of a sudden their drop back percentage drops to 45% or 46%. I'm sorry. No other team's below 50. And that is because they say, all right, we're going to get this basic look. Okay, we can run the ball like they did against the Cardinals, or we can pass the ball typically to Deebo, or when the zone coverage is a little bit more spread out. So
some of those yak opportunities, if you're going to play zone and let us complete balls underneath, we have the guys who can hammer you in this way. They have the perfect answer to every question. That is why they're so scary right now. I was talking to a defensive coordinator this morning who played against the Niners this year, and I was asking him, why don't teams play man against the Niners? Just very simply. And the two things that he came back to were, it's a matchup thing. A lot of teams just don't feel like they have the guys to match up with those guys over and over and over again. Because if you're playing man, you're probably going to have a linebacker on McCaffrey at some point. Yep. And that's just not a place that you can live. And even with some of the other guys, it doesn't make a lot of sense because you're going to have a matchup disadvantage somewhere. And then the other side of it was all the motion. Because some teams, even teams that motion a lot right now, it's one motion here, it's one motion there, it's a jet motion, it's one of those little out motions. The Niners will do 3 shifts every play. Yeah. The tight end bumps from one side to the other. The fullback now goes from the slot down into the backfield. Deebo's in the backfield, but then now he's going to motion into the slot. McCaffrey's going to go home back to the backfield. What they're doing is they're gathering information, but they're also undressing you. So essentially, every defense, you have to show what your hand is because they're doing so many things before the snap. And one of the questions, well, why doesn't every team do this? Every team can't do this. It's so complex and there's so many different moving parts that eventually you're going to start hamstringing yourself, and they never do. The Ravens do such a good job of being hard to predict. They play a little bit of everything. And the defenses that have succeeded against the Niners relatively this year are the ones that have gone against that simple menu. The Niners get like 48% cover 3 on early downs, in part because of the run looks. Teams that have succeeded against them have said, we're not doing that. We're going to play a little 2. We're going to play a little quarters. We're going to play a little bit of man. So the Ravens structurally are the type of defense that should give the Niners trouble. But with some of those motions, can you undress what the Ravens are trying to do and maybe get a little bit more of an answer and have a little bit more predictability before the ball is even snapped?
It's the couple examples from the Cardinals game. I used my article this week. I previewed this game for Yahoo. Was the double motion or double shifting is what it is. The Cardinals, what they try to do, and they do this with Buda Baker, is they do the 3 safety looks. Where and what kind of a interesting thing.
I actually appreciated what the Cardinals were trying to do against.
Do you see what they were doing? They wouldn't drop Baker until the 49ers
and
did their
dropped
first shift.
8 like 15 times. Yeah. They don't have the horses, but I appreciate the problem solving.
That is the 2023 Cardinals. I appreciate what you're doing. Let's see what happens when you get some players, because this is interesting. But we'll talk about more of them this spring. But they 2 plays from that just stood out to me was, one, they started in a bunch formation. Usually a bunch formation is the tight end is at the point at the top of the bunch. It's 3 guys, or he's inside towards the offensive line. Simple twist here. The 49ers put Kittle, a tight end, on the outside. And what that does is it gives a nice, simple man or zone tell. If there's a safety out there on Kittle on number 85, if I saw Buda Baker out there, I see number 3 out there. Okay, well, I know it's man, but there isn't. There's a corner out there. Well, right there, it's zone. So then Kittle goes in motion. So now it becomes a balance formation, 2x2. The Cardinals drop Baker down. They go, okay, I know now what you guys are in. I'm going to drop down. The 49ers get into a run because they know you're in zone. They know exactly what they see exactly what they want. They shifted the entire defense from one side to the other. They then motion use check right at the snap of the ball. He kicks out with Kittle, and now it becomes an overload to the left when they showed an overload to the right. All this happens in 3 seconds. And it just requires so much communication against a defense that was wired to stop it. So that's what they do, is they're just going to make you be so simple, or at least show what you're going to do or what your intent is going to be. And they exploit it. And it's a pain in the ass. It really is for defenses. And that's why it's interesting, because the Ravens try to do that, their own version on defense, and try to hide looks and hold things. All right. How are they going to play against all this motion, all this shifting?
Theoretically, the Ravens should have the personnel to match up with this Niners team as well as pretty much anybody they've played against all year. The 3 teams, I think, relatively that have given the Niners some trouble at points, even though their success rate against the Bengals was very good. I would say the Bengals, the Browns, and the Vikings, in some portion of the game, made it a little bit tough on them. What those 3 teams did, and the similarity with those 3 teams, is they can play with 3 safeties at the same time. The Vikings, that's their base defense with Josh Metellus in the slot. The Browns are more than comfortable doing that. They played in their big nickel with Rodney McLeod in the game pretty often against the Niners. And then the Bengals are willing to do that with Dax Hill, Jordan Battle, and Nick Scott. That's the Ravens' base defense. With Kyle Hamilton in the slot, they're already in their big nickel. So the types of guys you would trot out personnel-wise actually make a lot of sense. The problem is, if the Ravens are going to try to play nickel against this Niners team on early downs, because they're not going to let them throw it on them, the Ravens defense has not been very good at defending the run out of nickel. When they play nickel defense, they play with the lightest boxes in the league. 6 or fewer guys on 74% of their snaps. They're 17th in run defense success rate out of nickel this year. They're top 5 when they're in base defense. So eventually the Ravens are going to have to make a choice. Do we want to play base defense and let you throw on us, or do we want to play nickel and run the risk of letting you run the ball consistently? And if I'm choosing one of those options against this Niners team right now, I want to die slow. It may not be the best answer, but that's where I'm landing. I want to die slow. I'm going to make you run the ball for 5.5 yards a pop, because I will not let you beat me with explosive plays.
You brought them up. The Bengals defense was my best translation for what I think the Ravens are going to do. They run everything. So that was like, okay, even if and they run out of a quarter shell generally. And the Ravens, like you said, probably they have a lot better horses right now than the Bengals do, especially on the second level. And I could see, though, switching up between quarters, a little bit of blitzing, a little bit. The Ravens hide it even better than the Bengals do. But I just thought, because what happened in that game, Purdy ended up making just a couple mistakes.
And
they torched them, but they torch everybody. And that's, again, you need to get them to drop back, which is usually you have to go into 3rd and long, which means you have to win 1st and 2nd down. So that's saying a lot. Okay, how do we do that? Well, the right tackle, you have to beat up on the right tackle. Okay, that's one weakness there. But the other way is Purdy's going to try some tight window throws. He's going to try stuff over the middle. You got to get 1 or 2. You have to. And that's just the formula. And yes, it's asking a lot, but that's what these type of games come down to. It's just those big 1 or 2 swings.
I think you need to play some man. I know it's dangerous. I know
Oh,
they've
yeah.
carved it up. I think you need to make him make a couple throws
The
in this game.
the Ravens, when I was breaking it down for the article, it was like, okay, they were like 8th in cover 3, they were like 7th in cover 4, 10th in cover 6, like 16th in man. They run everything. So that's I'm saying not go 32nd man. No, run a little bit, run 4 snaps of it, 3 snaps of it. You have to. And I just think hiding it and just hope you're going to get gashed. All that post snap movement defenses want to do. The weakness of that is somebody might miss a gap. And when that happens, is a gash in the run happens. Look what the Rams did to this Ravens defense.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to do all that funky stuff. We can gash you. That's why Spags' defenses can get gashed sometimes in the run game. Jim Schwartz too, with the Browns. That is just a traditional counter to funky looks. So that's going to happen, but I think you still have to do it because that's the one way. You can't just live basic and you just get shredded by this team.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that you just have to get out of those boxes that the Niners want to put you in.
Yep.
And ultimately, leaving yourself a little bit more susceptible to the run is probably the best answer.
Be
The
untraditional.
matchup, I agreed. And the matchup that I'm so fascinated by is just Roquan Smith against what they're going to try to do with McCaffrey. And I assume that they're going to try to get him on Queen as often as possible. But the teams that they've really shredded are bad at linebacker. Think about what they did to the Eagles. And that's one area where this Ravens defense is just a little bit different at one of those linebacker spots, is that guy is a demon in coverage. You can get him in the run game because he's a little bit undersized if you want to run the ball at him. So that becomes the push of the pull and the cat and mouse game on that side of the ball. It's going to be fascinating. The other side of the ball is pretty damn fun too.
It's great. It's
I mean,
great.
this is a great matchup between two very good units. The thing I keep coming back to here on the big picture level, this is a huge moment for Lamar, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. You're going against one of the league's premier teams, against one of the league's premier defenses. You are in prime time. The entire country is watching. Everyone's just on a sugar high from all the cookies that they just ate over the last 6 hours, just buzzing for this game. And I think this is a real chance for him to show off what he is now within this offense that they're currently running. I think the Niners have a lot of ways to defang that, but I think this is a big moment for Lamar and this Ravens offense to kind of assert themselves into this championship conversation.
He could have his Heisman moment. He could definitely have a Doug Flutie against Miami on Thanksgiving kind of moment. Christmas, like you said, everyone's tired. Watch it. If Lamar has his hero moments, and I've come with Lamar is a merger of Archie Manning and Matthew Stafford. I think that's what I'm going around with. Watching him run around the last couple of weeks, it's just. But compare that to 2019 when he was running around. It was running around and then scrambling. Now it's running around to throw stuff away, or it's more like Mahomes. Or it's to throw stuff across his body. He has always done that, but that's what he's leaning into more. He's truly the trick shot artist right now. But I can't wait to watch this matchup, especially what is asked, what 49ers ask offenses to do to a quarterback to be a hero, to make hero throws down the field in tight windows, or to extend plays and make them go off script. That's into Lamar's game. So I think it could be some real big highlights, even if it's going to be very tough, because that's what the 49ers defense asks quarterbacks to do.
We had that moment in the middle of the season where people were really worried about the Niners defense. Steve Wilks moves from the booth down to the field. You have those kind of, all right, how are we going to settle this? Because there's a lot of apprehension about the way that this unit is playing. What has changed, in your opinion, since that 3-game losing streak and since that bye that they had in week 9?
They traded for Chase Young. That's one thing. And that helps. And I hinted at this earlier in the show. They kicked off Isaiah Oliver, who they signed the offseason from. He was their slot starter to start the year. And they had Diamador Lenore. God, that's such a fun name. Diamador Lenore on the outside. I have really liked Lenore. I think he's a very good player. I really young ascending player. Pretty good on the outside. He held his own. He did his job on the outside. They bumped him back into the slot. And that has been a revelation for this defense. And that's really tied the room together nicely for this defense. So that has made them more sound in coverage, man coverage, if they want to run it, because this 49ers defense likes to run man coverage on third down. That is the big difference with Wilks. And some of his blitz stuff, but that's every defense coordinator has their little blitzes that are there. So that's the other thing too. So putting Lenore there, getting Chase Young to expand their pass rushing repertoire, it's really, that's been the expansive things for this defense.
You look at the sack numbers, they were getting pressure in the first half of the season. They're just not getting home as often as you want them to. So between weeks 1 through 9, they only had 18 sacks, which ranked 18th in the NFL. Since week 10, after their bye, 25 sacks, which is the most in the league. So they're finally starting to get home. And when you pair that soundness in coverage and those tweaks that they made with what they're doing up front, this is the final answer. So if you're this Ravens team, where do you think you can get after a Niners defense that's kind of found itself here over the last month and a half?
The first thing I'll be looking at is the injury report and seeing how the defensive tackles look for the 49ers. Eric Armstead and Javon Hargrave missed against the Cardinals last week, and the Cardinals had a lot of fun with that. They
are also not practicing.
Okay. I knew they were I saw day to day was what I saw yesterday. So if you watch that Cardinals game, who are coached very well, but again, don't have a ton of talent. They were tons of double teams, tons of stuff where it was getting up into Fred Warner's lap, and Fred Warner wasn't able to play like Fred Warner, where he erases things because the defense creates edginess up front. So if they're not playing, it's not, I mean, they could really look at that again at that Cardinals game, because James Conner is a lot like the Ravens running back, Gus Edwards, who will be the primary running back, I'm guessing, after Keaton Mitchell got hurt. So that's also something. The 49ers linebackers are more run and hit. They're 230. That's what they're designed to do. They're fast. They're amazing in coverage, but bigger running backs can bounce off of them. The 49ers have been missing tackles lately. So that is just the one area, the one way I think that you can get after this team, because I think no matter, you can do it in base or nickel, but I think no matter, I would prefer base though, because Oren Burks is injured as well, their third linebacker. Is the one thing is that passing is tough because they're the anaconda defense, but you can find ways to run the ball to take advantage of their aggressiveness and their size.
27th in run defense success rate, this Niners team is. I mean, it has been a consistent problem all year with teams that can run the ball effectively, and the Ravens have one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL. So what that looks like and how they can try to get after them on the ground, I think, is one of the biggest questions. I'm fascinated by the Lamar-Fred Warner matchup. Because think about all of those layered throws that Lamar does so well over the middle of the field, even with Mark Andrews out, and think about what Fred Warner takes away. So how they play off of each other and what that looks like over the course of the game, I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And the last thing, that Ravens defense or Ravens offense last week with Ronnie Stanley out, the pass protection is a concern. So can Nick Bosa just blow this game up? Can Nick Bosa and Chase Young just blow this game up? Because that is the one area, even when Stanley's been healthy this year, he hasn't really been healthy. It's been so iffy all season that becomes something to monitor and something to potentially be concerned about if you're Todd Monken, if you're Lamar Jackson, and if you're this Ravens offense.
And the other thing too, like Armstead and Hargrave out, is that they provide so many fun looks for this 49ers defense on passing downs. And so if you're just taking, even if one of them's out, that just kind of, okay, that, you know, they're still awesome, but it neuters it a little bit. I'm sorry. But the other thing too is the 49ers don't blitz a ton, but they will blitz. Is Lamar can be up and down against the blitz. It's just how he plays. He is a big play merchant. It's up and down. Turnovers happened with that. Sacks happened, but he also can get after you. But this year he's 20th in success rate against the blitz. That's between Mac Jones and Zach Wilson. He's 19th in EPA per dropback between Russ and Gino, which actually feels kind of fitting. But it's that, but again, so do the 49ers lean into that? Because they will. So do they sprinkle that in to maybe just heat up Lamar?
Those third down looks, man, coverage wise, this is one of the first teams with the Ravens where you feel comfortable about their ability to win some of those matchups against man coverage on third down. And so that is another one where that Niners secondary is playing well. It's really settled in terms of who the personnel is. This Ravens receiving core is just a different sort of beast than they've been in years past. And we'll see how healthy they are with OBJ kind of nursing everything that he has over the last year. Zay Flowers limited with a foot, etc.
And Charvarius Ward is playing like an all-pro. Holy crap, he is playing awesome right now. My prediction for this game, not prediction for this side of the ball, not like who's going to win, who's going to score more points, is one particular play. I'm going to call my shot every week here on out until I get one right.
I love it,
until I get one right. And then we can clip it. It's great on social. My prediction, Lamar hits, I had OBJ. Lamar hits our receiver on a corner route in the red zone for a touchdown on a high-low. I think you can get him.
It's a very, very specific prediction.
That's why I'm nailing it here. He's going to hit a corner route on a high-low, and it's going to be a touchdown in the red zone. It's there. It's there. I'm telling you, it's there. So that's what I'm going with.
All right, let's get to our next game here. One of the other games of the week, and that is the Cowboys and the Dolphins. This is a late game on Christmas Eve. It's going to be happening at the same time as the Bears-Cardinals game. So the only reason I know that is because I've had to figure out how I'm going to watch the games because I'm going to my mom's house. So this became a whole thing. I'm going to my mom's house on Christmas Eve. And I'm Christmas Eve is a full slate of games.
Yeah.
So I can't drive out at 3 p.m. because there's games going on. So if I drive out there before the noon games, are there going to be enough screens for me to watch all the games I want at my mom's house while I'm braising short ribs for like 6 hours? The answer is yes. We have settled on this. We're going to have 2 televisions. So one is going to be on Bears Cardinals and one is going to be on Dolphins Cowboys.
I've never asked this. I know your dad and I know your brothers and stuff like that, but is your mom into sports? Like, I actually have never asked. Like,
my mom likes sports. Yeah,
Okay,
my mom likes sports. And my mom will sit and watch the Bears game with us.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was she's indifferent or into it.
No.
Okay,
my mom enjoys sports. I would.
Yeah.
My mom probably wouldn't watch a football game alone if it was on, but she watches it with her husband. She watches it with us. All that. So yeah, she's into it enough.
I was curious because obviously my family's just insane with it. But it's my in-laws and stuff, like sports has just always been in the background. Like, even if we're just nothing's on, just put whatever games on, whatever sport. Oh, golf, sure, why not? Sunday, yeah, why not? Saturday, whatever. What's on? Oh, college basketball, sure. And that is a foreign concept to my in-laws. Like, they've come around now. We've been together for a long time, but that is something that they're like, oh, I remember they came in one time. I was watching rugby sevens. It's in the spring, guys. It's in May. Like, come on. It's a dead period for sports for me. And I would just watch it and they just go, rugby, huh? Okay. And they just kind of walked out. And I was like, that I knew they were like, oh man, we really worked into something with this guy.
I'm not watching random rugby matches, but there's definitely a lot of sports on all the time. Truly though, before we get to this game, this is funny. The person in my life, the woman in my life who watches the most football and talks to me the most about it is my grandmother, who is 91 years old. And she just watches every Bears game and reads the paper every single day, including the sports section. My dad's mom.
Okay.
And so she will ask me questions about the Bears consistently. So she watches games alone. She watches every single week. So those are the conversations with the family member I have the most discussions about the Bears with, either my youngest brother or my grandmother. So that's how that settles out.
The family member I have the most discussions about this show with is my cousin Jack. Shout out Jack. He's probably listening right now. Just a Jets fan who kept asking me about Zach Wilson, but I want to give him a shout out. But he's the one that peppers me the most questions and the most thoughts about the show. So I wanted to give him a shout out.
So as we're settling into family time on Christmas Eve,
yes,
as the short ribs are almost done on Sunday, this Dolphins Cowboys game is going to be kicking off. This Cowboys defense coming off a very troubling game against the Bills. And my biggest question about this matchup and about what we could find out on Sunday, are we starting to see the cracks in this Cowboys defense? Was last week a blip, or is this something that's indicative of what's to come? And are the Dolphins, as constructed, equipped to take advantage of this Cowboys defense in the way that we saw Buffalo do last week?
That I want to say, it's like Jonathan Hankins is such a huge part of this Cowboys defense. And man, you just got to wait for him to come back healthy, but he has a high ankle sprain. So even if he does come back healthy, which at any time in the next couple of weeks, it's still not going to be 100%. And so what's been disappointing to me, at least maybe that Bills game is living in my head, is maybe some of the Seahawks game too, is just that the lack of adjustments sometimes.
I didn't even think about the Seattle game. Seattle moved the ball officially on them the entire game. So it goes back a couple of weeks now.
Oh, because I waved that one away. Oh, they were just cocky.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, they hit some pretty high variance plays in that game. Yes.
Yeah. But again, and I will say the Cowboys pass defense played better on film. Rewatching it, they held Josh Allen under 100 yards. But watching on film, they actually held up better than I thought. But that run defense, what's the answer? What are you going to figure out? Because the Dolphins, even with their offensive line injuries and whatever's going on with their personnel, they're gonna try and find something. Like, they're gonna attack it. Are you gonna let them get into I formation and pound it down your throat? Because then, oh my God, think of who you have to play in the NFC playoffs. Everyone's gonna do that to you. So they have to put it on film. They can't hold anything here because, man, it's becoming a thing that teams can attack this downhill run game. The tackle pull stuff is just power, but it's tackle with pulling away from the tight end as opposed to guard pulling towards the tight end.
What do you think the advantage of that is? We're getting like too deep into the weeds, but why do you think a team would want to pull the tackle on that play like the Bills have been? Because that's into the mainstream discussion about the Bills now. The tackle pull plays. It's been all over the internet 100 times this week.
I even did it for Wind the Clock. Yeah. It's a gap scheme, which is better for more power offensive line, even if like Spencer Brown is more finessey, which is good for pulling, But then you look at Osiris Torrance, you look at Deion Dawkins, like those guys are maulers. So that helps them, that lets them block down. Usually the most common run out spread looks is zone. But what happened in the NFL the last few years is defenses went, okay, all you guys are running is zone. All right, this
They
happened in
want you
college
to
too.
do that. If
Yes,
you get
they
in those, if you
want
get an
you.
11 personnel, teams want you to run zone right now
Yes.
out of the shotgun
So
because they have
predictable.
every answer to it.
Yes, they have everything, every twist, everything in college too. This has happened in college, but gap scheme provides puller, provides different angles. So teams are now saying that changeup is now their main pitch. What the Rams did was duo. What the 49ers have done, what the Ravens have done, what these guys are doing, what the Dolphins do, what the Bills are doing, they pull guys. And because of that, it's because that is better for the angles. That's better for how the leverage of the defensive line. You're blocking down as opposed to blocking forward and horizontal, if that makes sense. I'm trying to like do this over the podcast, but it's just the angle of the blocks is the best thing for it. And on top of it, it has answers if guys move. And wind the clock, what the Bills did, what I thought was really well done, especially by Deion Dawkins, was adjusting to the different looks from the Cowboys. Bell was screaming down on one look and he adjusted to that. It just has answers. It gets a hat on a hat. And sorry, last thing here, does not involve the tight end. There's so many receiving first tight ends now, and this is making me more like them as far as prospects because teams have answers to not have them blocking. They are not involved in the play. So you can go a super spread look. You can block away from the tight end. That is huge for this type of play.
What is interesting to me about the Dolphins' run offense against this Cowboys team and where they've been struggling is that the Dolphins want to hurt you on the perimeter. But if the Dolphins, as constructed with all these offensive line injuries, I don't know if you saw it earlier this week, but they asked McDaniel about the offensive line and he just shrugged on Monday when they asked him about the injury report, because that's what's going on. It's pretty much every single member of their starting offensive line. So with those injuries and the style they want to play, if they can get into their heavier personnel looks and run the ball downhill on this Cowboys team, now the alarm bells just start going off because they, in a lot of ways, are not set up to do that. And if they can, I think it's time to start smashing that panic button.
In the weirdest way, this Cowboys defense is better equipped to stop the one Dolphins thing that's been gashing people on the ground, all the outside pin pull, all that, because they're fast as hell. Like they're so fast and they can, even if they go the wrong way, they can recover. And they're the one defense that can kind of sort of match this Dolphins offense. Jets a little bit too. Holy shit, the Jets defense. Oh my God. It's like,
the Dolphins put up 30, and I think people thought that it was just
so
a dog walking. That is not the case. It was the one Jalen Waddle play. They got the ball inside the 5 another time. Yeah. The Jets defense gave them a lot of trouble.
A lot of issues.
The Jets defense, though, I think is set up to play against this Dolphins offense in a way the Cowboys are not. So,
and that's what's interesting. And also it's what the Cowboys leaned into against the Bills was a ton of man. What they leaned into against the Eagles was some man, but then a lot of quarters, a lot of cover 2. So which one of those they lean into, I think is huge as well. Do not do man. I don't think that's smart. But on the flip side, watching that Jets game, okay, what did McDaniel do when the offensive line's banged up, a feisty defensive line? He threw 10 screens in week 15 against the Jets. That's the third most by a team this entire season. They've been averaging 4 of those a game. They threw 10. So I think there's going to be a lot of screens no matter what, because that's just going to be one of the answers to just get the ball out and not let, Tua have to hold on to the ball too long.
The man coverage stuff is, to me, one of the bigger questions about the entire game. The Dolphins do not get man coverage played against them. Okay. They're dead last in the NFL. It's like 7% of their total dropbacks. They face man coverage. No team has played more than 16% cover 1 in a game against the Dolphins this year. The Cowboys haven't played less than 21% man coverage in a single game this year. They've been under 30% one time. So this is a team that plays predominantly man coverage against an offense that sees almost no man coverage. And I think that's for 2 reasons. 1, teams are fucking terrified of just getting hammered by those guys beating you over the top. And 2, similar conversation we had about the Niners. All of the motion is going to dissuade teams from wanting to play man against you. So where do the Cowboys land? What is the answer if you're not going to be able to play the style of defense that you typically like to play?
Jeez, I think I think it's quarters and 2 and quarters and 2 and quarters and 2 and quarters and 2 and just live that way and see if you can win up front. And
that's what teams have done and had a little bit of success against the Dolphins this year. That has been the best blueprint, even though it's not a great answer.
But then we're talking about Dan Quinn and his the hubris of his faith in his defense and wanting to say, hey, go rip them and go man coverage, which again, I think you could sprinkle in. I think that's totally fine. It's just what you major in. So I'm curious. I think what you have to do is live that you're going to give up some stuff underneath just to limit the gashes and to trust your offense. Again, this is a team ball type of game.
And obviously a huge question in what could play into their decision about how much man coverage they're going to play is whether Tyreek Hill even plays in this game. Yes. So there's a chance that he's out again. And that is another reason why you just don't see much man coverage played against the Dolphins. So this is a big test on both sides. I think the Dolphins, you want to see them keep rolling against what is still a very good defense. And for the Cowboys, they need to stop the bleeding. And I know this is not a good team to have to find that against, but they need to stop the bleeding. On the other side of the ball,
it's kind of perfect though. Like the one thing that like the Dolphins could do, you already hinted at it. It's like if the Dolphins are in I formation and they run it down the Cowboys' throats, then it's alarm bell city for the Cowboys.
That's right.
Like that is just terrifying. But if they just find some answers, that is more indicative than anything. So that's just kind of like
I'm telling you, I'm just like a piece of Kleenex up the nose. Like I just want to stop the bleeding for like a tiny little bit right now. I don't have to fix everything.
Round 5.
I just want to stop the bleeding a tiny little bit.
That's perfect.
On the other side of the ball, this is a monstrous test for the Dolphins defense. I know the Cowboys offense didn't play well last week, but this is a unit that's played very well and a quarterback that's played very well for most of this season. The Dolphins defense has been great recently, but they have played against the worst slate of offenses in the NFL by DVOA. I mean, you look at the list of quarterbacks this team has played this year. It's not their fault. You play who's on your schedule, but there have not been a lot of tests for this Dolphins defense so far this year. This is the biggest one they have gotten all year. I'm very excited to see how they measure up when they're pushed a little bit.
It's a very good checkpoint for both teams, especially it's like this is what we really need to make sure that you're legit. The Dolphins defense you can rely on no matter what's going on with the offense. They can find their explosive plays. That's a great recipe to be something in the AFC. In the NFC, it's like we thought we could just no matter what. This offense is gangbusters. This offense is elite now. It doesn't matter who you're going against. Wow, they're going to go against this Bills team and get after him. And it's like Zach Martin gets hurt and the whole thing came unraveled. And wow. That was
still not practicing.
I know. And that is more than anything. The Zach Martin injury is going to decide a lot on this side of the ball. At least you have a week to prepare. I will say that. But I think at least it's crazy. I totally get what you mean that you watch. Like I was watching that Dolphins front go against the Jets offensive line. It was just pressure after pressure after pressure after pressure.
It was one of the biggest mismatches of the season. Truly one of the biggest mismatches of the season. The Jets offense could not function against that front last week. That is how good that group has been, even without Jalen Phillips. I know the Jets aren't good, but that has been a truly dominant unit for stretches so far this season.
Again, this is, I always say when people, highlight truth and reply and they go, oh, they're going against so-and-so. It's like, yeah, you want a dominant unit to feel dominant when they go against an inferior opponent. Like that's the whole point of looking dominant. They look more back and forth when they go against another dominant opponent. That's how it works. So you want to see that, but like Bradley Chubb is playing fantastic. As long as with all the other guys, but he is playing well against the run, playing well against the pass. They don't blitz too much. They are a classic like Fangio defense. It's often imitated, never duplicated. Like I can tell you exactly what they're going to do on every single play, more or less. Like 90% of the time I go, okay, that's 3. That's man. That's quarters. That's 3 week, yada, yada. But you got to beat it still. And it's really
can Dak be the guy who can beat it? That becomes the question because the Bills are not like that. The Bills are a little bit harder to decipher. And you have some injuries on the back end of the Dolphins defense. Javon Holland's still not practicing. So it does feel like this is a potential game for the Cowboys offense to get right. And I think they need to for people to build back some of that faith in this current Cowboys recipe.
I think it's going to be a lot of CD in the slot. I'm very, very curious if Jalen Ramsey follows him, which is also another easy man zone tell. Ramsey's only had 3 snaps in the slot the entire year, which is hilarious if you watched him with the Rams the last couple of years. 3 snaps in the slot. They all came last week against the Jets. All 3 were in man coverage. All 3 when Ramsey was on Garrett Wilson. So do they do that with CD, who likes to line up the slot again, or do they lean into zone looks as well? So that's something I'm going to be looking at. And the other thing is both teams, or a lot of teams like to against Fangio defenses, get into empty. Talked about this several times. The Bills torched it earlier this season. Dak loves to throw the ball out of empty. He's 3rd best EPA per dropback out of empty, 10th highest empty rate. So how does that matchup go? Because the Dolphins are 5th best in success rate against empty looks. So that's another kind of schematic trend I'm going to be looking at in this game.
The last player I wanted to shout out, and we talked about the front, Christian Wilkins, Zach Sealer did a great job. Andrew Van Ginkel has very, very much impressed me this season.
Go Badgers.
So Andrew Van Ginkel was an edge rusher for most of his career. You know, that's how they used him in Miami, and he has played off the ball for the Dolphins for long stretches of this season, depending on what sort of personnel they're in. And he's actually done some decent work in coverage. I was very impressed about what he was doing against the Jets last week, and just some of those moments he's had over the course of the season. So just one guy I wanted to shout out who's had to be a slightly different version of himself this year, and I think has acquitted himself very well when given that opportunity.
Him and Van Noy were together for a bit. It was fitting. The Dutch Army knives. It was perfect together. Yeah. You want to shout out a player too, or whatever?
Sure. Yeah.
I am looking to is especially on the Cowboys side. I mentioned the empty stuff. Attacking over the middle is just going to be so huge in this game. That's how you have to get after a Fangio defense. So Jake Ferguson, I think, is going to be a huge player in this game. I think he's a key player anyways for this Cowboys team. But the Dolphins are 26 in defending, 26 in DVO. Oh my God, 3, 2, 1. Dolphins are 26 in DVOA defending tight ends this year. That's a lot of underneath stuff, but you can get a gash after him, get David Long on a double move, something of that sort. So Jake Ferguson, I think, is going to be a key component of this Cowboys attack.
Those are the two big matchups of the week. Another pretty big game for playoff implications is the Bucs and the Jags. Has lost some of the juice just because Trevor Lawrence might not play in this game. But one thing we definitely wanted to take a longer look at is the Bucs offense. So we're going to do a little bit of an under the hood here about why the Bucs offense has just been exceeding expectations this year. They're 16th in passing DVOA. It's not great, but it's much better than we expected. And Baker's been top 10 in EPA per dropback this year. And I think he really has been playing some of the better ball we've seen him play over the last several seasons as this team really tries to take, let me do that again, 5, 4, 3, as this team really tries to wrestle away control of the NFC South and kind of sneak into the playoffs in a way that people didn't necessarily expect. So just on a broader level right now, what is this Bucs offense and this Bucs passing game specifically doing that's allowing them to get away with this?
I'm going to describe the Bucs players. I think you can discern what they're good at. They have 2 excellent veteran wide receivers. One is very good in vertically and jump ball. One's good from the slot. They have a running back who's a good pass catcher, but has an iffy vision as a rusher. A little iffy.
Even the running game is terrible. They're 31st in rushing success rate.
Maybe wave that away with him as a prospect. I do think he's useful. They have an offensive line with 2 quality tackles and a shaky interior. If you just brought up that run game stat, that's all tied together. And they have a quarterback that's boom bust. So what do you think they're good at? Launching the shit out of the ball. That is what they're good at. But they're good throwing. They're not very good running. They're a bit boom busty. They're 8th in explosive pass rate. That's better than the Lions, Seahawks, Rams, Bills. But the Bucs offense is 31st in explosive rush rate, where they have 12 explosive runs on first and second down this entire year. The league average is 24, double. That's average. It's double.
Man.
Oh, their first and second down rushing success rate is only better than the Jets. And we just kind of just blasted the Jets in their offensive line in the last segment. But what happens is Baker Mayfield is willing to stand back there and rip some throws to his very talented pass catchers. And they have some talented pass catchers. They have 2, like I said, they have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Cade Otton is pretty solid as a pass catcher. Rashad Wallace. Rashad White is a very good pass catching back. He used to be a wide receiver before he converted to running back at Arizona State. That all makes sense. Trey Palmer is a twitchy, random, explosive, like just a wild card that you throw in there every once in a while when he was playing. So it's just what they do, a little bit of everything. They use their players well. They do the best they can with their front, with their offensive line. Tristan Wirfs, their left tackle, is playing like an all-pro. And it's working for them. It's boom bust, and it kind of works with their defense. That's kind of boom bust as well. That's the Bucs. It is the cannon at Raymond James Stadium. That is the Bucs. They just boom every once in a while, and then you clap.
It's funny that you say that. That's a good analogy and a good metaphor, because I always like Baker the most when he's just pointed in one direction and you just let him fire away. There's no wiggle room either way, like a cannon, just very solid, pointed in one direction. And what feels different about Baker this year compared to Baker in previous years, in my opinion, is the way that he has dealt with pressure and the way that he has navigated the pocket. So it was one of the biggest issues and one of the biggest questions, concerns I had about the Bucs coming into the year is that their offensive line felt shaky. You got Tristan Wirfs moving to left tackle, Luka Decky, who's their right tackle, second-year player, didn't play well last year. Ryan Jensen's still not healthy. You got a rookie right guard in Cody Mauch. It's like, all right, I don't know about this. I don't know how I feel about this. Last season, Baker was number 1 in the league in pressure to sack rate. About 30% of his pressures turned into sacks. It was the worst rate in the league. And he's been pretty high up there in other seasons as well.
Yeah.
For the first half of this year, he was second to last in the league in pressure to sack rate. Only Mahomes was turning a lower percentage of his pressures into sacks than Baker was over the first half of the season. It was 15%. So he cut it in half from what it was last year. And that has really allowed this offense to function because when you are protecting him a little bit and when he's able to navigate and survive messy pockets, he can play. Like the guy is a solid quarterback when you put the right sort of bumpers around him.
Yes.
And what's interesting to me, 2 quarterbacks I'll compare this situation to. Dave Canellis, who's their offensive coordinator, who we can talk about here in a second. He was the quarterback's coach for the Seahawks last year. One of Geno's biggest problems when we saw him for a short stretch in 2021, taking over for Russ when he was hurt, is he was taking an obnoxious amount of sacks. He was up there near the top of the league in that pressure to sack rate that we're talking about. Year 1 of Dave Canellis as his quarterback coach last year, that was not nearly as much of an issue. I don't know if there's a way he's teaching the position. I don't know if there are certain things he's giving his quarterback that alleviates some of that, but I don't know, and that may be totally a coincidence, but I think it's notable that 2 guys who used to have really bad sack issues, when they started working with him, that has gone down. The other situation I would compare it to, the Bucs passing offense, the way that it's constructed, both in the drop back game and when they use play action, there's often something coming into Baker's vision late after he goes through the front side of the first couple of reads in a progression. It's giving him outlets so maybe he feels a little bit less jittery when he's been holding on to the ball for a little while. What that reminds me of is what the Lions passing game looks like, especially off play action for Jared Goff. He always has an outlet, so a guy who's not a scrambler can give you something a little bit later in the down. And that reminds me of what it's like to watch this Bucs passing game right now, is that one of the reasons that Baker hasn't short-circuited in the pocket is that he always or very often has an outlet late in the down that prevents bad and negative plays.
You remember Baker's rookie year when I think it was the Raiders game. It probably was because I was hate watching the Raiders then. That was 2018. Yeah. Right? Yeah, that was 2018. He was firing some seam balls, like just ripping them over the middle, right? Like that was kind of his thing. It was like, oh man, okay. All right. He'll fire. Like, who does that remind you of? A little bit of Geno, right? Like throwing those.
And Goff.
And golf. And yeah, that's that archetype again. Baker, again, thinks he's a little more athletic than he is. But I think the one thing that I'm seeing with Baker and what I want to compliment Canales, because they run an offense that is like Seattle's and a little bit like Green Bay's, where it's a little bit of everything. I couldn't say what their roots are, even if I do know what the roots are. But if I were just watching it from an all 22 sense, but when I watch him, is he uses Baker in the right way, which is what's the line I've always said about Baker and Russ? Baker is Russell Wilson without the athleticism.
Yes.
Watch how Russ plays this year. Watch how Baker plays this year. But Baker only has 83 quick game dropbacks this entire year. That's only higher than 2 other quarterbacks. So like he is down there. They do not do quick game anymore. Again, that's conducive to Baker's skill set. He is best when he gets to drop back and launch it. I always thought what Stefanski tried to do with him at the Browns, I understood, was do play action, let's make it safe, and let's push the ball down the field. I actually think Baker in the weirdest ways best as almost a true drop back quarterback that has the 5 and 7 step stop, which is like Goff a little bit. And so there is some comparisons. And sure enough, this is Baker's highest true drop back pass attempt percentage, meaning no play action, no screens. So they're doing 6 and 7 step dropbacks more than he ever has in his career.
It's not hard to do less play action and screens than the 2020 through 2021 Cleveland Browns.
Right. When you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, it helps when you can just drop back. Yeah. So some better receivers has helped Baker out a lot. But it works. It works because he's willing to push it. Everyone goes, why is Mike Evans playing better? Well, he has a quarterback. Or why is his stats back up there? Is this a renaissance here? Well, he has a quarterback willing to give him the ball. All right. Same vice versa. They kind of work together. So it's kind of just worked. It's not perfect, but it's worked. And they're finding ways to score points, and it's fun.
What do you think happens with Baker after this season? Obviously, he's a free agent. He's making $4 million this year. Do you think that he deserves to be a starter moving forward? Do you think he's going to be the starter of the Bucs? How would you project what Baker Mayfield's next 12 months look like?
Man, it's hard for me because I think what's happened was because he was the number one pick, he got a lot of hype, especially after his rookie year, and then everyone dragged him down. I've made fun of him on the show. But the thing was, it wasn't like he stunk and he was a bottom 5 quarterback. It was more that he was like, oh, he's average. And it's like, well, you're the number one pick. That just seems bad. And so I think, though, that he deserves to be a starter somewhere in this league, especially when I see what's starting right now. And I think if the Bucs can't find a better answer, if they make the playoffs, there's not a lot of avenues where they can find someone better than Baker. So I think it's one of those where it's like, I think it's best for both of them that they have each other in the back pocket. But I do think how Baker has played, I see a path for him to be a viable starter. Yes, you have to have some talent around him, but you can win with him. And I think that's very important to prove in the NFL.
Yeah, and we'll see what he's asking for. But if you can give him a 2-year, $15 million deal where you can spread it out over a couple of years, you keep the cap hit low, you give yourself some financial flexibility, I think that he deserves at least a longer look for that role based on the way that he's played and based on the way the offense looks. The other question I would have, let's say they stumble over the last 3 games. They don't end up winning the division. Todd Bowles gets fired. You think that Dave Canellis has proven so far in the 15 weeks that you've seen him that he deserves continued opportunities as an offensive coordinator?
I do. The run at first, when I was an outsider, I would always see the stats. And then as I started studying them, it was funny. The first time I studied the Bucs was when they played the Vikings. I think that was week 1, right? It was not a great team to study an offense is against that Vikings defense. And so I've checked in on them throughout the year.
We've learned that over time.
Yes, we have. We did not know what we were dealing with then. But I've watched this offense unfold. I'm like, oh, the run game woes. That's a personnel thing, not a scheme thing. All the run answers are a hat on a hat. Like they're not running into bad boxes, which I usually is my big alarm bell that this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Cardinals from previous regime. But it's like when I watch this team, it's like even the stuff that doesn't work, I understand why they did it, which to me means this guy knows what he's doing. That's just all I can see as an outsider. So to me, I think he deserves to call plays because I think he's doing a pretty banged up job right now. I really like it.
It's nothing crazy. It's just stuff that makes sense and is good. That 4-strong all-go running back seam touchdown to Rachaad White last week. It was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like I like that. Like the ways.
Oh, everyone does it. It's like, exactly. It works. It's like, sometimes that's what you have to do.
It's like, all right, that's a nice little wrinkle. We talked again about stuff coming back into Baker's vision late in downs and giving him some outlets. I think that's just really good coaching. And some of the ways that they've used Evans and Godwin, either one of them in the slot, both of those guys on the same side with some of those, hip slot tight end formations that we talk about.
Yeah,
the 2
not why
on one side,
hip slot. There you go.
You got the 2 receivers on another side. They just the way that they've deployed those guys and the way they've deployed their best players, I think, is a testament to the job that he's done. So I'm at least intrigued by what Dave Canellis' career looks like moving forward from here after the job he's done.
I agreed. One last comment about Mike Evans, though, is that I think he's slowed down enough athletically, like 10%, that it's helped his route running. It's a theory of mine. It's that because he eats up so much ground, he's so tall. I don't think people really realize how big Mike Evans is. He's like 6'5", 235. Like he's big. He eats up so much ground as a route runner that now that he's more like a 4.58, 4.6 guy, because he ran like a 4.4 or something, is that it's helped his route running because it's like slowed him down where it paces better with the dropbacks. That's one of my theories of mine right now with Mike Evans, but he is also playing fantastic ball right now.
One more game we wanted to get to here, just a couple things to watch for. Lions-Vikings, very cool matchup. One of the best defenses in football so far this year, an elite Lions offense. What is one thing that you are watching in this Ben Johnson versus Brian Flores matchup that we get this weekend?
It's a Vikings defense that dares quarterbacks and offenses to push the ball and do it promptly against an offense that knows how to push the ball and loves to push the ball. So that is right there. What I cannot wait to see. I think how Jake Browning played with the Bengals last week was pretty cool to see him step up and do the tough stuff. I know that game was tight, but I mean, he was throwing doubles. He was trying to throw haymakers. That's what this defense dares you to do. I think the protection from the Lions can hold up against any blitz looks and the designs because they are a vertical based offense. They don't run a lot of quick game. They want to attack downfield. So I'm excited to watch. There's going to be some fireworks because I love a classic gash or be gash type offense defense matchup.
We talked about this a little bit on Sunday, or just the recap show. Frank Ragnow being in there for the Lions, huge in this game specifically, because they had been struggling against pressure looks without him in there to help sort it out. So him being there against that Brian Flores team, I think, is hugely important. One specific note, when you're talking about some of those gash or be gashed, aggressive downfield drop back concepts. Two plays, there are two examples of one specific play that has hurt the Vikings defense this year. The Bears to get into field goal range for their game-winning field goal with DJ Moore, and then the Bengals on a couple chunk plays late in that game. Is the dagger concept, where you have one guy running off, and then you have the number one receiver running a big dig kind of from the outside behind it. That has hit the Vikings a couple different times this season when teams have put air into those zone coverages and held up long enough to throw that ball. The Lions are probably the best dagger team in the entire NFL. It's exactly how they like to play, where you have those big inbreakers coming in behind and Goff just letting those things rip. So that play specifically, where your number two receiver is just running off and your number one receiver is running that big inbreaker behind it, we'll see how many times that comes up, because it has been one specific thing the Vikings have, in moments, struggled to defend this year against a team that does it better than anybody.
They're going to hit one. I don't need much of a prediction to tell you they're going to hit one. The Vikings, why they get hit with them, dagger is a classic staple cover two beater. Mm-hmm. The Vikings play a lot of cover two. They rotate to a lot of cover two. It's very hard to rotate to cover two and then all of a sudden defend a dig as you're running back there from the line of scrimmage. And then, now you got to defend someone at 20 yards coming across your face. So, and the Lions, like you said, run it as much as anybody. So, but again, it's gash or be gash, because Purdy tried to throw one of those. They got picked on it. And that's it. They're going to try and bait you into throwing a pick because you recognize it later, see the zone late or something of that, but they'll hit one.
Speaking of gashes, what Jahmyr Gibbs has given this team from an explosive run perspective this season and over the last few games specifically has been very cool to watch. When I was talking to staff at Detroit before the season, one of the names that came up and one of the ways that they thought they might use him is as a zone runner. And they thought that was an underrated potential application of his skill set coming out of college. And the name that was brought up to me was Jamal Charles. John Dorsey, who is in Detroit right now, was in Kansas City with Jamal Charles. So that was the name he was thinking about, apparently. That's what I was told when they ended up drafting Jahmyr Gibbs. And if you look at the pop that Gibbs has given them in some of those zone run looks, it really is an explosive element to an offense that most teams don't have on the ground right now.
Yeah, he's fast, especially on turf. Guys are faster on turf. That was... Randy Moss on AstroTurf, or Dion or Barry or all those guys on AstroTurf when it was just concrete. Like, that's speed we'll never see again, because now guys have to wear cleats no matter what. But Gibbs on turf is one of the fastest players in the league. It's unbelievable. But I'm fascinated too, because Gibbs has gotten better, but the big thing with him is protection. David Montgomery's better. They're a protection back. Who do they lean to? Are they going to try and get 5 out with Gibbs, or are they going to lean into more protection? The Lions, like with Montgomery. So that's another kind of like a little design tweak I'm curious to watch.
I'm going to admit something here. I did not solicit fourth screen emails this week. I forgot to do it. So we're going to be doing something a little bit different this week. I'm going to have my own sort of fourth screen email. Okay. The holidays are a time for family reflection, occasionally, though, for some tough conversations. And I'm only saying this to the Eagles because I care about them. But you guys need to take a breath, okay? They've lost 3 games in a row, and it feels like their season is unraveling, but it also, to an extent, feels like they're unraveling.
Yeah.
Last Monday, Nick Sirianni said he felt good about the people they had in the building when asked if there was any changes in responsibility on the horizon for the staff. A week later, news trickles out that Matt Patricia is going to be taking over for Sean Desai and calling in the Eagles' defensive plays. Technically, Sirianni wasn't lying, because Patricia was in the building. At this point, that might be Matt Patricia's biggest appeal, though, is that he was in the building. In the season before he was hired as the Lions head coach in 2018, the Patriots finished 27th in EPA per play on defense. In his 6th season with New England, 6 seasons with New England, they finished in the top 10 once. Over 3 years with the Lions finished a combined 31st in EPA per play on defense while Matt Patricia was there.
Too. Okay, so bad, guys. Yeah, I know. I mean, that was year 1, year 2 of the show. It was so bad, guys. There were so many miscommunications. It was awful.
And yet here he is again.
Yeah,
pencil behind the ear, coming to salvage the Eagles' season, only to lose a pivotal game to Drew Lock on national television. That's the defensive side. As for Sirianni, he is carrying the same foreboding Italian Christmas energy that Jamie Lee Curtis was bringing to the Seven Fishes episode of The Bear.
God.
Right now, he's just ripping cigs over a steaming pot of gravy with his eye makeup running down his face, asking repeatedly if we have a problem. That is his entire vibe right now.
And yelling at other coaches for calling timeouts. He's losing it.
Even Jalen Hurts shattered this kind of unbreakable veneer that he brings to every single post-game conversation when he floated that there was a lack of commitment from the podium on Monday night. At this time last year, Philly felt like a team that could do absolutely no wrong.
Nothing.
And now it feels like they can't get anything right. Even when they were rolling earlier in the year, something just smelled off, and that stench has only gotten worse. And this is the time to get right against this Giants team and get your house in order before New Year's. If they don't, if this continues and this lingers even into this week and into this final 3 games where they're not playing against anybody good, then it's time to really start worrying. But that's it. That is my Christmas message and Christmas card, letter, however you want to put it, to the Philadelphia Eagles, because in the throes of my own Christmas plans, I forgot to solicit 4 screen emails.
Still liked it. I liked it. It was in the same reference. It was perfect. Yeah, no, it was in the same vein of that. So bravo. Great job filling it. That was good.
I just ripped that off this afternoon.
No, you're right.
I could have done a better job, but
you're right. I saw Drew Lock throwing game-winning touchdowns on you. That'll hurt you. That'll hurt you just a little bit.
How are you feeling about that Eagles team right now? Do you feel like this is a temporary lapse? Do you feel like we're like actually seeing some real issues that are going to persist? And just not even in terms of like the football stuff, but just how everything feels right now.
Well, the offensive stuff has been frustrating because, again, I feel like there's always just one page behind what the defenses are doing. I still think they can be explosive, but the down-to-down stuff has just been frustrating. I feel like they kind of loses some game script, or loses themselves in the game script, doesn't know like when to run the ball, when to repeat a call. And right now it's Sirianni and Brian Johnson. So I'm not sure, I don't know who they could turn to the rest of the year. Of course, in the offseason could be a whole totally different story. I'm not saying anyone should lose their job or anything. I'm just saying they could figure it out. I would say defensively, I think it's just a personnel thing. They have no linebackers. Their safety has been banged up all year. They lost Avonte Maddox. The corners are 30-something years old and a year older. I think we all knew this regression would happen, but I thought they'd be more average-ish. But then they got hurt. And I think that's what this is what it looks like. I think you can do whatever schematic stuff you want. They just do not have the horses. It's just like we talked about the Cardinals. Oh, doing some cool stuff. Still 31st in EPA. That's kind of how I feel with the Eagles. But I think they still have a front that can get after people. And I also think that it's more against the good teams, the playoff teams, as opposed to maybe this Giants team against Tommy DeVito.
It's time for Tice's Touts, your 3 picks of the week before we get out of here. What do you got for me?
I didn't even write down what I did last week, so I don't even know how I did. I think I went 1 and 2. But I
went 1 and 2 according to Bill
okay,
here.
That's what it felt like. So picks this week, the Touts. I got Browns -3 at the Texans. That's just CJ Stroud based for me. I know what this Browns defense is.
We were going to do Browns Texans as the matchup of the week.
And we were excited.
It doesn't feel like it's worth doing without CJ Stroud in this game, unfortunately.
Yeah. Sorry, Case Keenum. But then next one going Packers -4.5 at the Panthers. Oh my God, that Panthers Falcons game was so ugly. But I just think the Packers team needs a win more than anyone. And I think the offense could get after this defense. And I don't think the defense is as threatening against this offense. So I think they can maybe find their way here. The last one is Raiders at Chiefs -10. I'm taking the Chiefs -10. Is that KC? It's the Chiefs. It's the Raiders. One team fired the coach and starting a rookie quarterback. One team has Spags and has Patrick Mahomes. That's my angle. And it's in Kansas City. So that's all I got.
Brave man handed 10 points to a team that put up 60 last week.
Oh, man. Oh, that's going to be a game we remember forever. What's what Chargers Raiders games, man? Just have those, remember the week 17 game? Herbert throwing all those 4th downs?
I would argue that was, even though they didn't make the playoffs after that game, I would still argue that was probably the peak of the Brandon Staley era, was that game. Because we saw what Justin Herbert could do. Exactly. Because that moment, that is the most prominent moment that Herbert had. And I think a lot of people, it's like, yes, he's one of those guys. Like, we can't wait to see what this is like moving forward. Then they go in the next offseason and we roll. And then the lowest moment of the Brandon Staley era also was a game against the Raiders on national TV.
In Vegas.
Oh, goodness gracious. Wow. All right, guys.
Football show.
The Athletic Football Show. It's a podcast. Please enjoy your holiday weekend. Please enjoy the time with your families. It's one of my favorite weekends of the year. I unabashedly love Christmas. It was such a huge thing for me growing up. Cannot wait to spend it with my brothers and my mom and my wife, and very much looking forward to that. So I hope you guys really enjoy the time you get with your loved ones this weekend. As a reminder, Tuesday morning, sometime late morning-ish, probably around noon Eastern, is when our Week 16 recap will be available to you. So do not look for it earlier than that because we won't have it. We're recording it the day after Christmas. So be on the lookout for that. Cannot wait to talk about this Ravens-Niners game. Cannot wait to talk about Cowboys-Dolphins and all the other stuff that is coming our way this weekend. For now, sincerely appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you soon.